Thank you. Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Ralph Montague, sorry. Excellent presentations from everyone. Thanks very much. And I'd like to take this opportunity that we have designers and contractors sitting at a table together to just ask a very simple question from the designer's point of view. Do you see benefit in sharing the design models with contractors at tender stage? And from the contractor's point of view, is there any value in the design models, or is it the case, as was mentioned earlier this morning, that maybe the value is not as appreciated? So maybe the designers could answer, and the contractors.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jordan. No, you're on. Yeah.
We do. When you build a successful BIM model and you then load it up onto a sharing site and allow contractors to go in and interrogate the model during the tendering process, it's obviously a better process. They can see much more detail than anybody can see in two-dimensional drawings. We've had mixed results at the moment. We have had contractors coming back and ask us to send them the two-dimensional drawings, which we can do, obviously. But yeah, I think there's a benefit. They can understand the project much better.
Thank you.
Yeah, from the architectural perspective, we'd agree to a certain extent. Just one kind of caveat on top of saying that it'd be great if everyone has the models at tender stage, is we need to make sure that the mechanisms are in place to allow that to happen. Just in terms of IP protection and some of the legal aspects of them, just throwing the model out there, from our perspective, we would see that as a little bit dangerous. Whereas some of the we're partnering with BAM on a couple of different things. Where that sharing that information, I think it would be and is hugely valuable at those stages. But I do think that the mechanisms need to be in place to make sure that everyone knows exactly what's going on and why the model is being issued and what it can be actually used for later on. A lot of those processes don't happen at tender stage. It kind of happens after the tender stage. So it's something I think as an industry we just need to look at and make sure everything's aligned to allow it to happen.
Client.
To give someone a box of drawings to tender and only give them one later.
Again, it's the leveraging the power of the model. And it's just to make sure that we do it in the most effective way for us possible and the best way for the client.
I think you're right, Ralph, there. One of the things you mentioned in terms of mechanisms you're trying to get to is sometimes we as contractors see great benefit in receiving the models at tender stage, and unusually some clients are reluctant to release the model, and maybe it gets back to designers' IP or the fact that they don't have full confidence in the model. And the benefit to us receiving the model at a later stage is less. So I think at BAM we recognise the ability to implement our own capabilities BIM in-house, so that either if the model wasn't provided we can create it, or if the model is provided and it's of a lesser quality, or it's a silo model, we're just receiving the architectural model and not the M&E and the civil structural, that we can fill those gaps and develop the rest of the model. But as an industry, we would certainly like to see that model sharing. I think in my presentation, it allows for that much better design collaboration, understanding of what the client is trying to achieve, and ultimately working with the designers of the exemplar design and the contractors. It's bringing the collaboration right to the front end, and certainly we would encourage the issue of models with tender documentation. It would be a benefit to the whole industry.
Yeah, I would echo that perspective that Lorraine just gave. I think, I don't know that most contractors recreate all the models from design teams. Whenever we get a model from a design team, we use it. As Lorraine said, sometimes there's gaps to be filled if one of the consultants or sub-consultants isn't modeling, but we always aim to use the model we get. We always ask for a model, even regardless when we get a set of drawings, we always ask for a model, even during bid or tender stage. We want both of those pieces of information. Having a model by itself isn't enough at this point, because most designers aren't contracted not to create a model, but are contracted to create drawings. And so that's what they're driving their deliverables for. So it's important for us to get both, but we do always ask, and we use any model that we get and fill the gaps. I think that there is a difference in the type of modeling that contractors might do when they have to model on their own. But most contractors are happy to take the design model and work with it even if it means tweaking it at times to fit your specific BIM use cases. For sure.
Thank you. Have we another question from the floor? Gentleman over on the right-hand side.
Hi, John Enon, CIRB. Question for the contractors really is, has using BIM in the tender process enabled you to reduce the risk allowances that you put in your submissions? And if so, by how much?
IP information. I think certainly it has allowed us to look at risk and the contingency that we may apply, whereas before we would always develop a risk register and understand those risks. We weren't maybe striving to implement the mitigation measures because we didn't have the tools to do so at tender stage. Now, by using 4D and hopefully 5D modelling to a greater degree, we've better quantity reporting, we've better cost estimating, we've challenged our construction sequencing, we've a level of coordination that we wouldn't typically get in the field, and certainly therefore our risk registers are more intelligent data. We can apply more intelligent contingency to them, and certainly we see a reduction. Not speaking directly for BAM, but I know there's a global statistic saying that using BIM, it takes risk and contingency down by a factor of 20%. So certainly we see benefits, and moving into 5D BIM, which is where we intend to go, we see greater opportunities to take that risk down.
Thanks, Lorraine. Right. Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to add that for us it depends on the contract form and it depends on the client. Just like for our trade partners, I'm sure it depends on the contractor they're bidding, what contingencies they build in for risk factors. Some clients, regardless of BIM, are still risky. Just like some contractors are going to require more work or different work from subcontractors. And so I think that the unfortunate and extremely frustrating answer is it depends, which is so true in everything of BIM, but it doesn't make it less frustrating, as I said. I do think that where we see the real benefit is when we are able to collaborate more seamlessly, because you need to actually get the results of that. You need to go through a process several times with the team. So when we use integrated project delivery, that's, I think, when we're able to reduce those factors ahead of time. Otherwise, it's still challenging to do so.
Thank you. Have we another question? Several now, so we'll...
Thank you for a very good presentation from all five. My name is Finn Burton, I'm working from Letterkenny IT. I note that there's a philosophy of some sort of reciprocal cooperation here being advocated, certainly by BAM and by Laura. How do you define who is custodian of the drawings? You know, if you're going to accept the model through a tender stage and language like you make certain changes or improvements, how do you define who, if something goes wrong, who takes responsibility for the initial design concept?
I can speak from a U.S. perspective. Certainly, these are questions that came up early in our adoption and in our collaboration. And so the way, from a process perspective, most teams go through that and put together a BIM execution plan that documents our process and who's going to model what, when, where, how, all those, so, whole protocol for that. And then there's several contract documents that are available. The AIA, our architects group, has their form of addendum, and then our consensus docs, which is led by probably primarily the contractors, but has input from basically everyone else. They have a separate form, and it's basically an addendum to the contracts that gets attached to each of the contracts to mitigate those concerns. I don't know that any contract is foolproof. I know that there are gaps in insurance, that there are better experts than I to talk about that for sure. I think that we tend to use the consensus docs BIM addendum and that makes the BIM execution plan a contract document, and that indemnifies parties to the degree that they follow that. But in practice, trust but verify.
It's one of the things that needs to be established in the project protocols in terms of this is what happens at this stage. Not only does the model get transferred over, but the responsibility for that model gets transferred over as well. So it's very much milestone based, and that's maybe where issuing models and tender can, kind of get a little bit willy. Is what's that model being trusted for in terms of taking enough quantities or anything like that, where there will be gaps on a tender stage model, and what that's filled with by the contractor as well is there depending on information that they didn't generate themselves. So that's primarily where I would be concerned at tender stage. But going from, say, a design stage to construction stage, it just needs to be planned and documented.
And I suppose you'd need to consider as well, there's many types of contracting. Are you, from a contractor's perspective, if this is just a build contract, is it design and build, is it design, build, maintain, operate, is it PPP, is it public works, is it private works? And I think those contracts will determine and dictate very effectively the ownership for the design and build will rest with the contractor, and if we decide to take it into the BIM platform, we are taking responsibility to deliver that project, and we'll take ownership for the model because we are engaging the design team. And likewise, if that was on a PPP, that would be the same situation. And obviously we're going to maintain on a PPP project a building for 25 years, so it's in our interest to ensure that that model is owned and managed by the PPP co, the entity ultimately that's responsible for delivering it, and thereby it's our responsibility to ensure that that model is accurate, consistent, and is a means for managing change as the project moves forward. So ultimately it's the contract which will dictate the ownership and the benefit of the model and where the responsibility will lie.
Thanks, Lorraine. Right, we have a question down the centre.
Thank you. Malachi Matthews from DIT. We're in danger here of attaching new technologies to an old process. And in terms of creators of the model and consumers of the model, and unless those two groups get together in terms of a true collaboration rather than cooperation, we're in danger of going into a situation that is already occurring in the United States, where companies who have adapted the technologies are reaching a plateau. So they have driven the technologies as far as they can go, but because they've not embraced the collaboration, they're on this plateau and they don't quite know where to go next. So it's a warning sign that is out there, and if we are coming at this from a new perspective here within Ireland, we cannot lose sight of the skill set that the contractor has on the consumer end to bring to the table to the designer, and those skill sets need to marry, and that collaboration is the most essential part of what we're talking about here, I would say.
Thanks, Malachi.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. But in order to collaborate, we do need to pull our industry from being completely contractual and completely confrontational into a complete collaboration. And I think we need to encourage our clients to move in that direction as well. Absolutely, the only way BIM will really achieve the full benefit is where the actual constructor and the client and the design team pull together and create one model and are working together to achieve the benefits of BIM. But if we remain with a strict contractual arrangement whereby we're trying to define the design to hand to a contractor and hope to build it, we won't gain a benefit from BIM. We'll just end up with three-dimensional drawings.
That said, and we're huge proponents of more progressive contracting firm methods. At the same time, most of us cut our teeth and learned the tools on what we call lonely BIM, right? And that's where you can learn and sort of push the limits of your software without having to address those risks that we were just speaking at from a contracting and errors and omissions perspective. And so I would say that although it's always better, you always get higher ROI from a collaborative process, that does not mean that there isn't benefit from doing BIM on your own in traditional methodologies, at least to start off with. We still saw that ROI. It's true that we all plateaued and some of us continue to on some projects, but that that's also where we learned and became a capable partner, so that we were qualified to collaborate. And so we had the basic skills so that architects could trust us with the models and know that we understand the limitations. So I think there is room for both, but I'm also, a huge proponent of more collaborative and progressive contracting structures, and would encourage to find spaces for that more often than not.
Right, thanks, Laura. We have time for one last question now. Gentleman here in the middle.
It's Cormac Allen from School of Architecture, DIT, Bolton Street. We're approaching the education challenge on two levels. One is postgraduate CPD for people who are already out there, and we're also conscious of the need to approach it at undergraduate level. And in conversation with some colleagues over lunch, there is a sense that there's resistance from the professional representative bodies to allow us to make the space within our programmes for radical new ideas on how to collaborate. We need to find a way of taking content out of programmes in order to make space for the kind of collaborative skills that you're talking about here, and the professional representative bodies, whether it's the professions or the builders, have a role in driving this.
Thank you. Anybody want to comment on that?
I think that there'd be a value of kind of linking educating the academic sphere of architectural influence as well as the what's happening in industry. And I think well, I'm coming from the DIT perspective as well, so I do have the experience where we can see industry people coming back into an academic environment and really succeeding well because they have that expertise behind them, and they can leverage out what we're teaching them from a technological point of view. And one of the benefits we have at RKD is then I can bring that back into our organization internally. So I think that that link between industry and academia is key for this type of thing. What we're trying to do, if we're trying to change industry in a radical way to win, it's something that needs to be considered.
Certainly agree, Cormac, and I think BAM certainly recognise that, which is why we like to participate at events like this, and we've participated at many, and we like to recognise and speak at DIT gatherings, and certainly we're always looking for opportunities, and we do engage in sponsoring students, and we believe that kind of the future of our industry depends on the graduates that are coming out of the various academic institutions, and certainly we believe that we need to sponsor and support those, and so we welcome opportunities to share our experience, and I think that's something that is a fundamental goal of us as a contracting entity, and it's something that we monitor and mentor going forward. So I certainly agree we need to make sure that the people that will take our roles in the future have had the benefit of our knowledge and our collaboration and our experience.
I'd wholeheartedly support Cormac in that. We at the moment have 4 of the DIT graduates in our London office at the moment, and we are training them in BIM. We would wholeheartedly welcome if they came out of the college trained, and we think the government needs to give the support to the third level institutions to allow them to actually deliver.
I suppose my core point is the professional representative bodies. It's the professional bodies of the RAI, the SCSI, Engineers Ireland, the CIOB. All of those organisations need to make space within what they tell us they want.
Absolutely.
So that we can adjust our academic programme to accommodate it meaningfully.
Very good, thank you, and I think CETA will be given that message.